Hi. The Death of the Banker by Ron Chernow. It was the next really good book I found to educate me on the history of Wall Street. And the back of it says about it, with the same breadth of vision and narrative elan he brought to his monumental biographies of the great financiers, Ron Chernow examines the forces that made dynasties like the Morgans, the Warburgs, and the Rothschilds the financial arbiters of the early 20th century, and then rendered them virtually obsolete by the century's end. As he traces the shifting balance of power among investors, borrowers, and bankers, Chernow evokes both the grand theater of capital and the personal dramas of its most fascinating protagonists. Here is Sigmund Warburg, who dropped a client in the heat of a takeover deal because the man wore monogram shirt cuffs, as well as the imperious j.p.morgan, who, when faced with a federal antitrust suit, admonished Theodore Roosevelt to send your man to my man and they can fix it up. And here are the men who usurped their power, from the go-getters of the 1920s to the masters of the universe and of the 1980s. Glittering with perception and anecdote, The Death of the Banker is at once a panorama of 20th century finance and a guide to the new era of giant mutual funds on Wall Street. I found this book really fascinating. And as I read it, my distrust of foreign nations grows still, since I read j.p.morgan Bank lured British and continental investors into being their partners with railroads on Wall Street. And then there was Henry Vanderbilt, who was no angel. He inherited 87% of the stock of New York Central Railroad and said, "The public be damned, I'm working for my shareholders," which seems to be true still today of all of them. It appears that banks are making foreign banks and enterprise partners to force a freestyle type globalism, in my opinion, everywhere around this planet. Specifically, their cohorts are or factually were the Eastern elites, foreign financial centers, and the absolutist powers of Europe. And I wonder, is this why all our country's problems are so alike for our workers? They have always been blamed for extreme inequalities of wealth, inflation, and economic slumps. But are they working to build a global bank? But as Mr. Chernow says, we curb the bankers' power by keeping them small and poorly capitalized, which ironically handed over the power to Wall Street, who had access to sufficient foreign and domestic capital to form mammoth trusts. The power is then grabbed by businesses, which are the biggest. U.S. steel and industrial business were the giants in that time. Mainly U.S. steel. I'm wondering now that they are sliding away from our country, is there money war raging on Wall Street between service type industries between these countries, because they want slave like people to pay slave wages to, that I have seen. And I have to wonder if the destruction of the Twin Towers where they were was just an act of war, and perhaps it was more deserved than we know yet. Anyway, details about President Roosevelt dealing with his problems made me even more impressed with him, reading about him in this book. He came up with creative ways to bring about justice and morals, and was tactful and ruffled no feathers. And religion popped up in this book too. And there's a paragraph, I'll read you about it in here, about the banks. And it says, Untermeyer, is not commercial credit based primarily upon money or property? And Morgan said, no, sir. The first thing is character. Untermeyer, before money or property. Morgan, before money or anything else. Money cannot buy it, because a man I do not trust could not get money from me on all the bonds in Christendom. This declaration was roundly cheered by businessmen, even if it prompted derisory guffaws from reformers. It certainly sounded as if Morgan was giving a sanctimonious veneer to what some would call plain cronyism. Yet perhaps the good reason here was, in fact, the real reason. Handicapped by limited information, bankers needed speedy ways to size people up and often relied on quick intuitions in the absence of hard data. Character was shortcut to determining credit worthiness, and clients often searched for comparable clues about the personal rectitude of their bankers. In 1904, the German sociologist Max Weber, touring the American South, was startled to see a local banker submit to baptism in an icy stream. When asked the reason for this, he was told that the banker had to establish his bona fides, not with the Lord, but with the depositors, who felt more confident leaving money with a devout Baptist. At a time when swindles were legion, honest information was the coin of the realm. Since it was often hard to verify reports about distant railroad, canal, or mining ventures, the readers of Trollope's fine novel, The Way We Live Now, will recall how a large portion of the London aristocracy was duped about the rail project in North America. The promoter's character was often the one sure clue to the venture's soundness. And personally, here in Oklahoma, when I see someone advertising using Jesus or God to advertise their business, I don't go there, because I went to one once and it ain't no place to go. I don't trust anybody who uses the Lord's name in business. So, the church construed the Bible to mean that Christians were proscribed from lending money at interest. That's usury. A special stratum of Jews were therefore plucked from obscurity and established at the express wish of the Christian community as a privileged banking caste. Wow, they thought of a way to get away from being blamed for their sin of usury, but yet they put the people in to do it. And sorry, when they go to Judgment Day, I believe they're still going to be seeing blood on their hands. Well, reading all this history, it looks to me that the Jews kneel to our rich sociopathic aristocrats. They not only used the Jews for money, they used them as scapegoats for their criminal sins and called it good. I won't listen to anyone who speaks of American Jews in this manner, as they look like guilty people to me. And there was quite a little bit of important history in here. Not really long, but short, sweet, and informative. But thinking of it, So now that computers and the internet have supplied Wall Street workers enabled to commit more bigger and faster crimes, easier for them to hide, they seem to forget one little detail about the internet. There is a huge, devastating damage and destruction that can reach them through it. It might be similar to the Twin Towers episode. That could happen even worse. If this power comes through their computers and reach their world, bigger and longer than they could ever have a nightmare about, it could totally rock their world. And this fascinating book was like riding a roller coaster. I mean, I felt informed and sure at the beginning and puzzled in the middle and outraged at a lot of the history that I found. And I have one more question of this book. What stumped me in the middle was that he has his opinion here that that Main Street will come to own all stocks and bonds on Wall Street. But yet I hear that a lot of people with little money doesn't make very much on Wall Street, and they usually can only afford to buy penny stocks. And that gives me more research to do. So this is really a good book. And I thank you, Mr. Chernow, if you happen to listen. Yes, there's the picture. And I'm thinking about reading more. This book was put into the library in '97. So it must have been 95 or 96 that it was processed in. And now I've got to go look up and see what was in politics in that year too. So I hope you enjoy it. And if you want to talk to me about the Main Street opinion he had, I'd love to hear what you think he meant by it. That's one that I need to research. Y'all have a great evening. We'll see you later.